What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I am one of your hosts, MC Fixer, and today we're going to be talking all things Biomutant. How rude of me. Unfortunately, I haven't introduced my two co-hosts. Joining me today, we have the one and only Kresh. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing good.
And
excited to be talking about this.
Matt P. Video. How are you?
I am also here. Hello, I'm very good, very good. Yeah, really excited. The first time we're doing kind of a standalone review video where we can deep dive into a game. Yeah. I'm very excited to do so.
So we've all been playing a little game that a lot of people are excited about called Biomutant. So let's start off of where we're at with the game. I think this is the fair place to start of how many hours in and where we're at with the game. So for myself, I'm probably around 4 hours in. I'm enjoying my time with it, but not loving my time with it. Kresh, what about yourself? Whereabouts are you in time frame?
I did about, I think I clocked in right under 2 days for my main playthrough, and then I did start a second playthrough just to see how things went with that. I'm a little bit in the middle as well, where there's some things I really like about the game, and then there's some things that just sort of are off-putting about the game.
And Matt, where about you?
I'm about 16 hours in. It's difficult. We don't want to spoil the game, obviously. I think I've finished kind of one of the bulky story sections, like one of the kind of objectives the game gives you at the start. Similar, right? Like, it's all very meek for us all to say we're very much in the middle on this game. Hour to hour, I was changing my mind on this game, and I still am. Like, sometimes I finish playing for an hour and I want to jump straight back in. Sometimes I never want to pick it up again. It's a really strange game. We're obviously going to talk about it a lot. But yeah, my opinion's changing on it constantly.
So I'll kick off, really. I don't know how we want to exactly do this, obviously. It's one of those games in terms of its story, right? I think what I was expecting from the game I wasn't expecting like a crazy deep story or anything like that, and that's exactly kind of what you get here from my experience of what I've played so far. It's very shallow, no pun intended, which we'll find out later on, in terms of what you have here for story. Every time I come up to somebody for a dialogue option in the game, it just, to me, in the way I was trying to play the game, it felt like it got in the way every single time. Again, 4 to 5, maybe 6 hours at a push I'm in. And for me, I found the opening of the game in terms of it wanting to very much hold your hand. The game is very much like, it treats you as if you've never played a video game before. Is the way I felt while playing it. It was like, this is how you run, this is how you move your camera. And what I understand that the game does have quite a deep RPG systems, right? They are there. There are a lot there. You've got your armor system, your weapon system, all of that. And I've really enjoyed the moments of when I was actually playing the game, but I felt like the game really wanted me, especially in this opening sections, wanted me to play it a certain type of way. And that just frustrated me throughout most of my gameplay experience of what I've played so far. Kresh, where do you come down on like especially the opening and the story as overall, as someone who's beat the game and tried to play and going for a second time?
I generally actually really agree with what you say. I don't want to spoil too much, but in New Game Plus, they let you open up with the game in a different way.
Oh, interesting.
That I think is a lot better, and I kind of wish that they stuck with that in the beginning of the game. I understand they don't want to overwhelm players. They want to sort of lead you down a path, but the new game plus way they do it is just a lot better in terms of the way they want to tell you the narrative, and you make choices and stuff like that. It all makes more sense with the new game plus opening as opposed to the opening that they give you in the beginning, where it is sort of like, we're gonna funnel you down this way, and you get one of two paths, where the game's all about choices, and it keeps mentioning choices. You don't really get, it never feels like I really have too many choices. It never feels like I have as many choices as the game wants me to think that I have.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's very much, for me, it feels like it does give you a choice, obviously, and again, no spoilers, it gives you choices, but they just don't feel very impactful at all. And we'll get into the narrator, obviously a key part of this entire game, but oh my god, 1 minute, at the start, I was very much, oh, this is really interesting, and then as time went on, it became very frustrating. But Matt, what about you for the story and what you've experienced so far within your 20-hour experience with the game? Like, where do you come down story-wise?
Yeah, I think overall I agree with everything you guys have just said. You know, I think for me, the story's an issue, and one of the things that's holding me back from the game, and I think it's because they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink into this story. It's you know, this isn't a spoiler, right? The opening of the game establishes there's a tree in the middle of the map.
Yep.
4 routes building off of that tree. Each route at the end of it has an NPC that's going to help you defeat a monster. There's also several tribes that live in this world. You need to pick a tribe that you're going to back and help them go through this thing. There's also a guy who lives in the tree who's an old friend of yours that gives you this whole other thing that's going on. And there's just so much going on in this game. There's a karma system that is very black and white. It's good
Literally.
and bad. There's no gray area. And so all of these tribes are either good or bad, and you better make a decision and make it quick.
Yeah.
It's like, there's just so much going on. And then the tone of the game is very whimsical, right? We've already alluded, there's this narrator, right? None of the characters speak to you. The narrator tells you what that character is saying. The world is, I guess, Earth, right? And people have destroyed this world, and now you're living in this world. And so nothing's called what you would think it's called, right? There's a telephone in the game. It's called the plinkety plonk. Like ducks are called quick quacks or something. And so when it's trying to explain this world to you, it's using language that you will not understand. You need to go talk to Glorp, and Glorp's miserable. But if you pick up some squeaky squacks from the cave in the da-da-da, it's mental the way that this game tries to explain itself to you. And so from the off, it was totally lost story-wise. The moment-to-moment gameplay was fun enough, and the mechanics, I think the RPG stuff is interesting enough to keep me going. But from a story point of view, I was almost immediately checked out, and it never really pulled me back in. And whenever it tried to pull me back in, I was annoyed by the way it's trying to pull me back in. The narrator, the language of the game, none of it sat well with me.
I actually don't dislike the language of the game. I think it helps build this universe as its own thing. The problem for me, like, even with the language, comes to the narrator. Like, it's not the characters saying these words. It's a narrator who seemingly knows more than everybody in the game, who could use, like, normal language and stuff like that. The narrator's just super off-putting. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 points where, like, the narrator's talking over, and it's like, oh, if they had used the narrator sporadically, maybe just during combat scenes and during certain story beats, it would have worked really well. But having every character voiced by a narrator, or not really voiced, he just sort of summarizes what they said.
Yeah. Every 2 seconds, he's just summarizing what's just been said. I just found every time the game was letting me play the game, it then took away from me actually enjoying it. Like, you come up against your first big boss in the game, and I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. I like the way this character moves. I like his moveset. I like the gun mechanics. I don't think any of it feels amazing, but I don't think any of it feels terrible. I couldn't sit here and say to you, this game is not fun to play, because I do actually have fun when it allows me to play. But in the opening 6 hours, 7 hours, right, it just feels like every single time I get to go and fight something or into this battle or whatever it is I'm doing the what do they call, like, their bases? I've done that part where you go
fortress,
the first fortress. Thank you. The first fortress that you go through, it's just like you do it, and then it's like, oh, stop, and then do something, and stop, and do something, and stop, and I'm just like, this is so jarring. And Chris, you can tell me, does it get any better? Does it just allow you to just play the game at any point? Or is it always very much, do this thing, stop and have a conversation. Do this thing, stop and have a conversation. It doesn't feel organic or flow very well at all. It feels very jarring all of the time.
That, for the most part, will be there for a lot of the game, especially when you're doing the fortress stuff.
Yeah.
Which the fortress stuff, in hindsight, actually doesn't take up too much of the game. There is a lot of the open world that is irrelevant of the fortress, which I actually enjoyed, and that's some of my favorite parts of the game. I absolutely agree. The fortress stuff is absolutely abysmal. Like, not going through the fortress, I think the fortresses, when you start playing them, they have, like, unique mechanics and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, this is cool. It's when they start throwing the story bits and you have to, your Sifu approves and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't like this, because A, it's not done super well, and then B, I don't really care, because I don't care about the story that they're trying to tell in that regard.
The interesting thing, right, is, like, the narrator and the fortress things, like some of us have issues with or whatever, they are both things that the game actively scales back on. You get to a point in the game where it says, hey, if you go into the options, you can scale back the narrator. So the narrator is talking to you less.
What?
And it's like, wow,
I didn't know that.
So, yeah. So because the narrator chats about what you're doing as you're running around the world, as well as... So
I don't mind
that.
That stuff I don't actually mind. When he's talking as I'm running past a tree and he points that out, like those things I don't actually mind. I'm like, oh, you're adding to this world for me. You're adding to the world. You're giving me a little bit more context for things that I may not have picked up on as the player. But when I'm just sat there speaking to a character, and to be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, I just want the conversation to be over. And it just goes on and on and on. And it's like, maybe it's because I'm only hearing the same voice just over and over and over again. It just becomes annoying.
Yeah. It's also, it hurts the personalizations of certain characters. It's like they all mesh into one character at a certain point because none of them, other than their looks, they don't have a distinct voice. They seem to lack a distinct personality as well.
100%. And the game asks you to make a choice to choose between these characters. Choose your favorite characters. And it's like, I don't know, I don't care about any of these. Like, they're all the narrator. Like, they don't have an individual voice. They don't have a personality because the narrator is telling me what they're saying. So I've lost all that personality anyway.
And I think it comes down to like what you were saying beforehand, which is this game to me feels very black and white. It's very much, you're going to play the game. You're going to play it however it is you want to play the game, and you're then going to make a decision. Do you want to be good or do you want to be bad? And the problem with that is there is no middle ground. There is no decision that lets you just go, I'm not good, I'm not bad, I'm me. And that's what this game, I felt like, from what it showed, was it was going to be, I am creating this character, and I am going to go through this world and absolutely just make my own decisions and just keep going. It's not that. It feels very much good, bad. What, black, white, literally. And it's like, man, that sucks. That sucks. To move, this move on a little bit onto at least, like, exploration of the world. Kresh, I think you're the best to start off on this just because you finished the game. Does that feel any better than it does in its opening?
Yeah, so as you're going on, it does feel better because you'll be walking by and you'll see like, oh, there's a rundown house, or there's actually like some funny stuff they do with like using current lingo where, you know, you flip a house and he's talking about flipping a house and he's talking about it as if people really flipped houses back in the day. I'm like, oh, that's clever. Cool. That's interesting. And there's moments like that you find organically in exploration while you're going through the world that's really cool. But when the game sort of, when you stop to do a side quest, it sort of breaks that immersion where I feel like either you add more personality to these characters I'm interacting with, or I would have preferred if it was more of a Zelda type of game where it's like, here's this open world, there's key stuff you can do in the story to influence the world and stuff like that, but we're not going to really hold your hand through a lot of it.
Yeah, I think the deeper you get into this game, the exploration is actually the shining gold star of this game. So the way it works is that your character has a certain amount of resistance to each type of toxic thing, right? So there's places where there's little oxygen in the world. There's places that are on fire. There's places that, and you spec out your character with gear and abilities that allow you to survive for longer in those places. And in those places, you might get better loot and fight different monsters and stuff like that. That, I think, is fantastic. Like, what a great idea. Like, yes, I can go anywhere in this world, but certain areas are much more difficult to survive than others. And I need to think about where I need to go, where I want to go, and is it worth me putting these level up points into resisting fire more because I want to go to that area. I love that. And then as you sort of make your way into those areas, there are certain types of vehicles that you can get that allow you to survive those areas even better and add a whole new gameplay element. And so, yeah, I think the further you get into this game, the more enjoyable exploration is. And the more you need to think about it and the more you need to actively engage with the mechanics of the game. And so for me, exploration and running around the world, minus talking to people in the world, is one of the shining stars of the game.
Yeah, I really like how they have their mount system. Sort of, you see mounts open in the wild. You get a pip, which is a fruit. Basically, you give it to the mount and you can ride it. It's not overly complicated. There's certain places you can buy them as well, and that all feels really good actually. Except the mounts feel a little bit clunky when you're riding on them. Sometimes they move faster.
Agree.
They move faster than it looks like they do a lot of the times.
Well, Yeah, that was an interesting thing for me. I didn't, and maybe I haven't found a specific mount that is good for this, but I haven't found a mount that I feel like moves faster than me just running.
Running, I agree.
You move fast running. You do move faster on a mount. It doesn't look like
it doesn't feel like it, and that's really weird for when you're on a mount. That I generally jumped off the first mount that you find, and you do the fruit thing and all that stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, perfect. Like, I've got my first mount. Here we go. At points, I was just like, I prefer just running, and I like the animation of him running, so it looks really nicer. Good. And it's just like, oh, I wish you would just give me the ability to just like run faster, then be to the same. No, you can, of course, but I'm saying compared to like the mounts, which they move a lot faster than what you can. So. Yeah, it's a really weird one. I think we should spend some time on combat because again, there's combat in this video game. I like it. I didn't think I would, and I didn't quite at the start. It didn't click straight away, and I feel like that's kind of my experience with the entire game. At the start, it didn't click, and then the more and more I played, the better and better I found it. I just find it weird to sit here and talk to the audience and say, oh, you're going to really like this game if you put 10 hours into it.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like with this. The combat is, I was really enjoying it. I enjoy the, when your gun's out of ammo and it comes up with a click, 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 click. I thought that was super like, oh, cool. All right, let me know to use this. Very nice. I really enjoyed that. The art looks beautiful. The world itself, I think, is really enjoyable to be in, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something we agree on.
The landscape you see as you're running by on a mount, and you get, especially later on in the game, you get these like big wide open areas that are super colorful.
Yeah.
It looks really good. It really, really is a pretty game in a lot of aspects.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And again, when I talk about this game is everything plus the kitchen sink, the combat is that right as well. Like I think the actual moment-to-moment gameplay of the combat is maybe a little shallow. You unlock a few cool abilities and moves that are slightly more difficult to pull off, but nothing crazy. The really unique thing is how you build weapons, right? You find parts around the world, and you can build any gun with all these mixed master parts. Like, you might pick up a pistol, but you can turn it into a shotgun later down the road if you want. And that's really interesting. And some of the abilities you unlock through that are really interesting as well, and fun to play around with. But again, the issue is, I found, especially early game, I was not finding enough of those parts to make that part of the game worthwhile looking into.
Yeah.
Now I'm deeper into the game. I'm finding those parts all the time, and I'm overwhelmed with those parts, if anything. And I'm making some really cool stuff. But I think early on, if they'd implemented that a bit heavier earlier on, I think it's a really interesting part of the game and a unique part of the game. Very Ratchet and Clank feeling.
Yeah, I do think that's one of the better parts about the whole customization experience, the making your weapons, choosing what you want to do, and then even with your armor, you can like slot in specific pieces.
Yeah.
And the weapons also have different element types attached to them. The same sort of resistances you have to get to explore those areas, you can start adding those same effects to your weapons, and you can start interacting with enemies that way. And I feel like that's a really cool system. I like the fact that the guns actually do damage.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you play a game where you use a gun and you're like, your gun's absolutely nothing. If you got a sword, you use the sword, or you're using the gun for some combos.
I kind of feel like almost to its detriment, it's the other way around. Like, I find myself using the guns 90% of the time over the melee weapons, and it's because, and maybe this is the way I've spec'd out my character, and fair enough if so, I have very little health. I feel like if I get one-on-one,
that's definitely a character spec out. Yeah.
If I get one-on-one with a boss character, I'm pretty much done, and so I find myself kiting and using the guns a lot.
Yeah, I think one problem that I had with the melee in particular was that with the guns being as good as they are, a lot of times when you use melee, your melee attacks are locked in, meaning you can't roll out of it, you can't animation cancel or anything like that. So if I'm using a two-handed sword and I swing my sword, I'm going to be stuck into that animation. Even the one-handeds, they're faster. They're just not as fast or as responsive as you need it to be. I would have loved to see them like, hey, you have that key meter. The character I was using, I wasn't using abilities, so I constantly had key meter that was just sitting there, not being utilized. Yeah, so I would have loved if it's like, I can use my key meter to cancel an attack and roll away, right? That gives me a little bit more agency as a character to play a more aggressive style with melee instead of needing to stick to my guns as much as I had to.
It's interesting because at the start of the game, you pick like a class and you kind of have a setup and it encourages you to use a certain type of weapon. It says, hey, this guy's best with two-handed, this guy's best with dual wielding. And I picked the dual wielding guy and I stuck with that for a really long time until when you start interacting with the tribes, they give you weapons.
Yeah.
And they're very specific and they have unique abilities. They are not customizable like the other weapons are. And I found myself leaning towards the staff. Mainly because you get a hover with the staff, which I found super useful. Jump off a cliff and I can hover just before I land, and that's why I use that weapon almost exclusively. And then I use guns for everything else. And so yeah, like I kind of wish I could customize that a bit more, or put that ability on a different weapon and mess around with that a bit more. But maybe because I picked that class, I should really be locked into using dual wielding weapons, and that's why I don't feel like I'm doing much damage up close.
The game does do a good job, I think, of like letting you customize yourself fully. Is something that I want to give it credit for.
100%.
You know, like you're right. I really liked like picking a breed and all that stuff at the start. I really enjoyed all of that. And I was like, oh, this actually affects things. This actually matters. So I spent a little bit of time sitting there going, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And really building out this character, and that's what kind of frustrated me in the start. It was like, I've built this person and now I feel like I'm talking to super shallow everything, right? Crash, it's an RPG. That is what this game is. Is it a good RPG in your opinion?
I think certain aspects of it. I think if for you an RPG is like you're building out your character, like you said, and you want to be this specific type of character, I think the game does that pretty well. I think like I picked a Ronin. I played a Ronin.
Yeah.
I felt like I was one. I felt it was really cool. I like the mount aspect. I like the whole premise of the world and all those RPG aspects of it. I really enjoyed. But then when you get down to the nitty gritty of like, it never felt like when I was leveling up my character, I was actually doing much with those level ups other than stat bonuses, which is really the more disappointing part of that. I wish that weapons maybe give me fewer options and sort of make those skill trees a little bit more impactful, or again, attach certain, like if I want to use melee, attach melee abilities to the key. Again, my key was absolutely useless for me. I used it mostly as a dodge mechanic for the fire dash, which the ability I got. I would just use it for that. That's the only time I would ever really use key. So RPG experiences, good on a character level, on a character basis, but for like combat and feeling like you're getting more powerful, I maxed out in terms of power around like 20-ish, 24 hours in. Every single weapon I got after that point, kind of irrelevant. Every upgrade point I got for the most part felt pretty irrelevant. Like I felt like I wasn't hitting walls anymore. I was just sort of blowing through everything pretty easily.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Because I feel the same way. Like when I'm leveling up moment to moment, I don't feel like it's impacting my gameplay all that much. But it's interesting to hear how differently we're playing the game. I'm using up key all the time. I'm using abilities to dash in and then set off like a little area of effect and then dash out. And like, yeah, I'm using it a lot and enjoying that aspect of it. And I'm using guns more heavily than it seems like you are. And so it's interesting, right, that we are playing very differently. And so
I think that's where the game shines, though. I think that's where the game shines, which is you will have a very unique experience while playing this in terms of what you build as a character. Like, all three of us have had very different experiences, right, with the game. But again, my problem is it's everything in between. When you're not just being that character is what the problem is. Interacting with other characters is a chore. Like the world, beautiful. Interacting with people, a chore. And some of the best RPGs that I've ever played are my experiences I have with other characters. It's learning about these characters. It's learning about their stories. It's learning about the world. And the narrator never really gets you to that point, which I think we all kind of wanted. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Definitely.
I agree.
So, the big question, I think, we were provided codes for this, so thank you very much. Would you recommend... Go on, Matt, if you've got one thing to add.
Before we get there, I'm curious to know how it runs on the Series X. And look, we're playing, like you say, we got these codes early for a game, for sure. And so maybe it'll run better. Maybe there's a day one patch coming. I'm sure there is. Almost every time I die, I'm getting booted out of the game. The game hard crashes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's the same for you, Crash?
Yep.
Wow.
That hasn't happened to me.
I've also had a quest glitched to a point where I can't do it, and it's a main quest line.
Like you can't complete it at all.
I can't complete it at all.
I had it where I completed it and it told me I completed it, but it stays in my log.
Ooh,
which is might have been what happened to you, so you might actually be able to advance it.
Mine, maybe, but so mine was went underground, flooded an area, and then went through, and I had to hack a thing, and I wasn't smart enough. I literally didn't have enough intelligence level to be able to hack it. Like I could not do it, and so I got locked out of that area. The only way to get out was to fast travel out, and now I can't get back to that area because it's flooded. The way into it is flooded, and I can't access it. Look, these things, we're playing pre-release version of the game. It might get fixed. But yeah, the fact that I'm hard crashing every single time I die is making it difficult to go back to. It's not a good look. No. But like I say, your experience may differ. But
mine wasn't like that.
Yours is fine on X?
I died a few times. I didn't crash every time that I died. I don't think I had a crash in my whole 6 hour experience, 6 to 7, 8 hour experience. I don't think I crashed once.
I was counting crashes in the beginning, and then I got about to like the 12 or 13 mark, and I stopped counting.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was crashing a lot when dying, a lot when fast traveling also. I'm assuming whenever they're trying to load you in a certain spot, at least with the Series S, it just crashes.
Yeah.
Which was unfortunate. I did also have a part where I went down into a cave, and somehow I think I was using the bubble and the fire dash to sort of like skip sections of what it was, and I ended up getting stuck into an area, and that almost broke the game for me. Luckily, I had an autosave that was right outside of the cave, and I was like, nope, not going back into you, which was really fortunate. And then I also had another part where it's like you're at the edge, and there's sludge around that you sink into, and I fell down, solid platform, and you see sort of sludge a little bit off of you above, and you can sort of walk into it. And if you walk into it, you start drowning, and you walk back to the solid platform. That wasn't a game-breaking bug. I was fine there, but it was something that was very apparent there. Other than that, like frame rate issues, I didn't really have too much. I think the frame rate was pretty solid throughout the whole experience.
Yeah.
Visually, I think the game held up the same look throughout the whole thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Kresh, as someone who has beaten the game and is playing it for a second time, would you recommend people buy this game day one?
I think if you're looking for a more Western RPG in the vein of Fallout or something along those lines, and you haven't had something in a long time, and you're like, I've been waiting for a game this year, nothing's come out, I've been wanting a Western RPG, I've been wanting something along the lines of Fallout, I think this game will certainly itch that for you. It's just go in with the right expectations. Don't expect a crazy narrative. Expect a fun game, just not a top tier game.
Matt P, as someone who's played it for 20 hours plus, where would you say your recommendation comes down?
I'm in a similar boat to Crash, I think. I often think like a good way of framing this is like, if you like X and Y, you'll like Z, right? You'll like Biomutant. And Fallout was one of the ones I thought about. For sort of the world and stuff. Ratchet and Clank, I think, for the sort of combat and guns and kind of silliness there. But I think it's a bizarre game. It's a bizarre game. And so yeah, if you're into those sorts of games, even Breath of the Wild, I think like the world is beautiful and has a unique tone and stuff. So if you're into those sorts of games and are willing to put a lot of time, you have a lot of spare time, I think, because to get the most out of this game, you have to put some time into it. And yeah, you like that kind of quirky craziness, I think there's something here for you.
Yeah, and for me, again, someone who's put probably 6 to 7 hours in, I just couldn't get over the opening of the game. And I think that's going to be a lot of people. I can't recommend it in that way, unfortunately, because of that. A game to me is a game, especially an RPG as well, it's supposed to hook you in and want you to go on a journey and want you to find out more about the world and its characters and its abilities and all of that. And every time I went to go and boot the game up, thankfully I have a great team here of someone that has beaten the game, someone a bit deeper than me. Like I would have done it for the review, but I didn't have to, thankfully, because we're a team and we get to do that, right? We get to bounce off each other. But every time I went to play the game, I just found myself going, oh, I know I'm going to have to listen to that narrator. Oh, I know I'm not going to get a story here that I care about. And that's why I play games. I play games to get unique stories and enjoy great gameplay. I felt like every time I was getting to some good to great gameplay, a wall would come through and just smack me in the face and be like, nope, now talk to this person, now talk to that person. And it never really just let me be free. And you could just say that's the first opening of the game. But in my opinion, you need to give the player a little bit more freedom than it does. So I, for that reason, can't recommend it day one. I do think it could be a game that maybe you pick up on sale or something like that eventually. Because I don't think, again, if you're looking, like Kresh and Matt have both said, if you're looking for an RPG, a Western RPG experience, this is a good one. But to me, I don't really have time for good anymore. I'm looking for great to amazing. And yeah, that's kind of where it comes down for me.
I think it's the first iteration. I can imagine a Biomutant 2 hitting in a really big way and having a fervent fan base that are excited for that, and it's a bit more refined and a bit more focused. And I think that could be really interesting. If they came out with a Biomutant 2 in a couple of years' time, I would be interested to play it. I would put time into it.
I do also want to note that the game was made by a 20-man team, so it's not a super huge team.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, for the amount of work they've done with the 20-man team, I do want to say, like, it is a good amount of work, and I do really enjoy, at the core of what's here, I really do enjoy it, and I would love a sequel. I'd be really, really interested in a sequel of them cleaning up some of these mechanics and sort of adding more to it. Not even necessarily adding more to it. If they just sort of clean up a lot of what's here, I'd really love it.
Yeah, clean up.
I hope it does well. I hope it does well, because it very much feels like the narrator was there for budget reasons. So I really hope it does do well. Maybe. So then they are able to probably bring in some voice actors and things like that, which would have, for me, I think would have really added to the experience. Because again, characters, I really enjoyed the look of them. They looked unique. The world's unique. So much uniqueness about this game. It just didn't mesh well early on enough for me to really keep me going. But thank you all for watching. This is our first review properly as a free brand new team over here on my Xbox and me. If you did enjoy this review, make sure you hit the like button. Of course, hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So please, please, please do that. You can find myself at MCFixer on Twitter. You can find Kresh at KreshNickPlays. And you can find Matt P at MattPVideo. And yeah, hope you enjoy this. Let us know in the comments below if you're going to be picking up Biomutant. And until next time, we will love you, leave you, and see you all later. Goodbye.
Goodbye.